Hi there, and welcome to this tutorial for bouncrrr. Whether you've heard about bouncrrr and you just want to see how it works, or you've already got a subscription or a lifetime license and you're looking for some tips and tricks to kind of use it more efficiently, or you're just interested in bouncing stems and you want to see how other people do it, you're in the right place. So yeah, today I'm going to show you how to streamline your bouncing process in Logic Pro with bouncrrr. So let's dive in. So you'll see I already have a tidy project. I've named everything, sort of color-coded things. Obviously the color coding, completely up to you. It's not necessary for using bouncrrr. I'll just find it easier to find things. And also the way that I've kind of done this as well, again, not important. You can have it in any order you want, any colors you want, or no coloring at all. What is important is the naming, because the naming here on the left side in your arrange, that will end up being the names of the tracks that you bounce out into the final folder. So filtered kick, when you bounce that out, that will end up being called filtered kick. You don't have to number anything here, as bouncrrr has an option to number it all for you. But yeah, just ensure you have the right naming for each track so you know what it is once it's bounced out. You'll notice here that this project is starting from track 3. That is because there are some hidden tracks. You don't need to worry about that. Especially if you're bouncing all stems, bouncrrr will just start at track 1, even though it says track 3 there, and it will number it 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on and so on. What you will need to note is the number of these tracks. If you are starting or resuming from a certain track within bouncrrr, which we'll look at later, it will go off of these numbers, not the physical number here. So filtered kick technically is the first track that we can see, but it is still track 3. So just remember that for later on. So obviously, as it stands, I'm going to keep it simple first, and then we can look at some of the more advanced features later. This will be bouncing out multi-tracks of the entire project. So that's great if you're sending off for mixing. Not so great if you want live stems and you want them grouped. That is possible with bouncrrr, but what I'm going to do, I'm going to get through the main bounce process first, and then we'll come back and we'll look at different ways to arrange your stems for different purposes. So now that we've got this lovely organized project and we want to bounce it out, we want to make sure that nothing's going to go wrong during the process. So I'm going to select the stereo out, make sure that any sort of limiting or dynamics, you can keep them on if you want to. Generally, I like to keep them off just to make sure that nothing's going to clip, it's not going to push it too hard. I mean, if you've got your gain staging in order and all that kind of thing, you should be fine just turning off your final limiter and maybe the compressor. But basically it just means that most things don't get too affected in the process. There are different ways to do this, which involve more complex sort of sidechain routing so that you can get it exactly as it sounds. But for the main process that we're going to be using it today, that's not necessary. So yeah, basically just make sure that the project's all neat and tidy, ready to go, everything's named, and it's not going to clip individual channels with a limiter at the end or any sort of dynamics processing. Once you've done that, you click on bouncrrr here. I've already logged in. If you haven't logged in, it'll ask you to, and then you name your project. So this track is called Avalanche, so I'll call it Avalanche here, and then stems, and I might put in, I don't know, 105 BPM and then A minor, I think it is, I'm not sure. And then you choose your folder location. So what this will do, it will open to the last folder that you opened it in. You find where you want to bounce the stems. Mine is in my Dropbox, and what it will create a folder with the folder name here when you press open. So it will be bouncing this folder into this folder. Sorry, it'll be bouncing the stems into this folder within the folder that you've chosen there. Then, number of stems. So you can either say, right, I want to do 4 stems, which will just be filtered kick, kick, live kick, trigger, snare. In this case, we want to do all stems, so we'll do that. This is what I mentioned earlier. So the choose track number to start from will be this number. It will not be 1 for filter kick, 2 for kick, 3 for live kick. It will be 3, 4, 5. Always go by the track number when you're using the track number to start from. We won't do that for now because it's not necessary because we're doing all the stems. But yes, just bear that in mind. So now you'll want to set up your bounce settings. This should be fairly straightforward to anyone that's used Logic before. You've got your wave, AIFF, CAF, MP3, AAC. You can choose whatever you want. You will have to have PCM selected. Yeah, there's not much reason for me to bounce MP3 or AAC, but I kept it in there just so it will automatically turn it off if you don't want those things. Choose your resolution, sample rate, file type. Again, people will know what those are if they've used Logic before. The other thing it can do is check for the active click and check for an active solo. So what this does is if you just say you're checking what some stems are and you solo that track and you go to the top and you forget. Traditionally, if you're bouncing stems and you solo like this, it's going to include that track that you soloed earlier that you forgot about, and you end up with 100 stems of perfect stems that have an extra track in them, which is obviously not desirable. So if you have the active check for active solo button selected, it will check if any tracks are soloed in the project. If they are, it will deactivate them. The other thing is checking for the active click, which should be fairly self-explanatory. We've all done it before. We've left our click on. We've got 100 stems, all with a metronome blaring out. This will just make sure that that's turned off and make sure that you're safe. So here we go, we've got all stems. You can also tell it to notify when you're finished. So if I put in my email here, sam@bouncer.co, and say stems are done. There we go, lovely. So what that'll do is when it gets to the last track and it's finished bouncing, it'll send me an email, it'll let me know, Sam, stems are done, you can come back. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to double check. In fact, I'm going to leave a solo on, I'm going to leave a click on just to show you what it does. One important thing is that when you are bouncing tracks, sometimes if you haven't soloed something in a version of a project, you won't see this button. Now Bouncer needs this button to operate correctly. So the way to turn it on is to solo something. Just any track, just solo it and unsolo it, and this button will appear at the top. Yeah, it's quite integral to the way that Bouncer does that. If you are having issues when you press bounce stems and it happens around the sort of time that it's checking for the solo, you can turn these off, especially if you've got a different sort of layout that maybe hides this button, or for some reason you've got this so small that it's hiding that. You can turn those off just to make sure there are going to be no issues there, but you will have to make sure yourself that the click and solo are not on. So let's leave those on, go back to Bouncer, and this should just bounce our stems. So there you go, getting ready to bounce. This is when it sort of collects the track names, so it will take at max about a minute or so, and it basically collects all the track names, figures out how many tracks there are, we are, and then it's got rid of the click and it's cleared the solo. So it will now solo the first track, go through, do your bounce settings as you selected previously. We'll just wait for it to do that. Then it goes into your bounce window, goes to your chosen folder, and then pastes the first track name, and away we go. So I've left the numbering on, so this will call it 01 filter kick, and then we'll go to 02 kick. And yeah, basically that's it for all stems. This will go through and bounce everything. Also built in, it is worth pointing out that if there are any errors within Logic, whether that's Logic itself or plugins, it can knock the bouncing process off track. So that is something that is out of Bouncer's control. It would be the same if you were sat in front of your computer and it happened, you would need to intervene. What Bouncer does try and do is that if you do interrupt the process, it will try and get it back on track automatically. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to try and interrupt it on purpose now. If I open the Finder here and it loses focus, this window comes up. So this happens whenever Logic loses focus. You'll see it's still bouncing in the background. It will automatically resume. You can choose to pause it if you want. If you did it on purpose, you just want to do something and come back to it. Otherwise, you just wait, and resume should take it back to Logic. There we are. It will cancel the current bounce, and it will just restart that bounce from the beginning again, and then it will just pick up from where it left off. It'll make sure the solo buttons are cleared, and then it will just resume the process. This will happen if you're on track 10. It will start from track 10 again. It won't go back to the very beginning. Yeah, so that's basically one thing that I've coded in to try and protect from all these kind of eventualities where something could pop up, a notification, something asking for updates, those kind of things. You'll also notice I've got do not disturb mode on here. Pretty good idea to have while bouncing, just so nothing distracts from the process. And also you'll notice the little bouncer logo up here. So this is your panic button. If anything goes wrong during the process, this is your best friend. If you are halfway through and for some reason logic has started hanging and bouncer's got stuck as well, press this guy, it will cancel the process, and up comes the don't panic. It's cancelled all the current actions, you're back to normal. It will stop wherever it was in the process, and you'll have to re-enter the sort of the folder name. You can do that, it will just go back to the same folder, and yeah, set up your stems again. And this is where the choose track number to start from is really handy. If you panicked quit on track 13, say, and you need to get back to it, you go, right, okay, that one didn't bounce because I panicked. And then you press there, start from 13, choose your folder location, do the same one. Let's call it the same thing. Stems 105 BPM, A minor. And then all stems starting from 13. Let's just pretend that's where we left off. Bounce settings will be the same. Click bounce stems there. Again, it will scan for everything. It should only take about a minute maximum, especially with larger projects, it takes a bit longer. But yeah, there we go. And so it's going from track 11. So we've started from track 13, which is technically what that track is, but because there are hidden tracks, it's the 11th track of 82. If that doesn't make much sense, don't worry. It was quite confusing to code as well, but it should just mean that all of your stems will be numbered sequentially from 1 to the final number, and that won't get interrupted if you resume from a different track. Yeah, so let's stop the bouncing here so I can show you some more advanced features. Take a second there. Right. So one thing to look at is obviously that was multi-track bouncing. Bouncer can also do grouped stems. So if I select all of these here and I create a track stack, which is a folder stack, and call that group drums, then there we have it. Bouncer will bounce that track and then move on to however you want to have it. If you want to have everything grouped, so I'll go to here as well, track stack, group, bass, then that'll bounce the drums as a group, bounce the bass as a group, and then bounce all of these separately. What you can also do is if you want the best of both worlds and you want to do it in one pass, you just select all of them and then option drag out there. So this will now bounce the group drums, it'll bounce individual basses, and then the grouped basses as well. You can use this to have any sort of setup for your stems that you want. It's very versatile, it's quite powerful, and yeah, anything that you can put in the arrange here, you can bounce separately. So for example, if I go to the lead vocals here, if I want to bounce just the reverb send, I create a track for that in the arrange and call it reverb send. I might want to reference what bus it was, possibly, and then that will also be bounced by Bouncer. You could even create a different track stack that has different effects, all of your reverbs together, all of your delays together, just your vocal reverbs, just your instrument reverbs, whatever you want. If you can put it in the arrange view, a Bouncer will bounce it for you. So one other thing we can look at is bouncing dry and wet in the same pass. This again, fairly straightforward. I duplicate the lead vocal track and I turn off the wet processing. So I'll call this one wet and this one, oh sorry, wrong way around. So that one will be the wet one because it's still got the sends on, which is the reverb and delay, and that'll be the dry. And yeah, again, if you want to group those, just create a folder stack of all your dry stems and a folder stack of all your wet stems. You can get a dry mix and a wet mix. Yeah, very, very straightforward and saves you even more time. So now, based on this very strange setup now, I have my group drums, my separate bass, my grouped bass. Everything else is separate at the moment. Got my wet and my dry vocal. And then I can just go into Bouncer, type in the same folder or a different folder. You can do whatever you want. Choose the folder location, all stems. Let's just go from the beginning this time. I've got my emailing on, and off we go. And that will bounce everything for you neatly into folders, numbered, you name it. Literally, you name it. And there you have it. Bouncer makes bouncing in Logic Pro a breeze. Do remember to check your tracks. Obviously, once they're all bounced, all sorts of things can go on with Logic and plugins. If anyone's been using Logic 11 recently, they'll know some strange things can happen. So I always recommend doing that just in case anything that is out of Bouncer's control has gone wrong. Even if you just drag all the stems into a new project and listen to them, that should be enough. But yeah, thank you for watching and happy bouncing. If you do have any questions or need further assistance, feel free to reach out. I'm on sam@bouncer.co, which I'll put this all up on screen now. But yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe for more tips and tutorials, and I'll see you next time.